So it's 7:05. We are going to get started. Thank you all for coming. My name is Noah Mertz. I organize with Equal Justice in Needham. And thank you for making it tonight to our event with Marvin Henry, 1 year still awaiting justice. As as many of you probably know, there was a really horrible incident about a year ago where Marvin Henry was held by Needham police in our own Needham Heights, and we're still waiting for justice for this event. And we'll be hearing more about that later. Just to kind of set uh, a couple things out there. We are recording the event this evening, so if you would like to, you can feel free to keep your camera on, but if you would like to turn your camera off, you can do that too. Please keep yourself muted while while we have everybody kind of bouncing around. We'll be hearing from a bunch of different speakers tonight, but it'll help with the sound if you just keep yourself muted. I'm going to try to share my screen right now and read a land acknowledgement. So let's see if I can manage that. Here we go. Okay. How's that looking? Okay. So as we gather together virtually today, we acknowledge that we do so on the occupied and unceded traditional and ancestral homeland of the Nipmuc and Natick Ponkapoag Native peoples. This is the borderland where their cultures met and was the land of shared home and travel, of trade and encounter, of learning and aspiration, of sickness and healing, of death and burial, of birth and blossoming, of subsistence and growth, of sacred worship, faith, and thanksgiving. We also recognize that we are on stolen land, and we extend our solidarity to the many Indigenous peoples who have rich histories here for their ongoing stewardship of the land. We commit to recognizing, supporting, and advocating for the sovereignty of the Indigenous nations whose traditional territories are in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as well as for the many Indigenous peoples who live, work, and study in Massachusetts. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and commit to holding ourselves more accountable to the needs of Indigenous peoples. All right, so a couple other things. We have a chat function that is live, so feel free to use that, but we just ask that you be respectful. And to just put it out there, we are here tonight to learn and to listen, and we are here to extend mutual respect to everyone, each and every person here. And the goal of this event is to try to help move Needham toward being more equal and more just. And so we ask that all comments in the chat be in this spirit. We do have some people monitoring the chat as well, just so you know. Let's see. A quick overview of what we'll be up to tonight. So our agenda, let's see if I can find that on my computer. Okay, so we'll hear next from Reverend Katie Scudera for a blessing. And then we'll be hearing from Marvin Henry and Lauren Sampson, his lawyer representative. They'll be in conversation about what happened a year ago in the Needham Heights, and they'll also be commenting on the recent internal investigation that the Needham Police Department just announced that they had finished. And then after that, we will offer a brief summary of what Equal Justice in Needham has been doing regarding public safety, accountability, and oversight. We've been doing a lot of research, and we've found some things that are fairly concerning, and we want to share with you just what we've been up to and some of the initial findings and where we're kind of heading from there. And again, we'll hear from Marvin and Lauren on their comments on those findings. And then we'll kind of end on a note looking forward of what do we do now? Where do we go from here? This is where we are. What can we all do to make Needham that equal and just place that it can be and should be? and then we'll wrap it up with uh, with some words on upcoming events. And uh, as always in Zoom world, bear with us for any technical difficulties, and we'll just do our best in managing those if and when they arise. And yeah, feel free to message us in the chat if there's any concerns there. I believe that, did I miss anything major, or we're good? Okay, with that, I'll pass to, yeah, Reverend Scudera. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noah. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to participate in tonight's vigil. My congregation, the First Parish in Needham Unitarian Universalist, has long been committed to racial justice and equality, from abolition in the 1800s to civil rights and fair housing in the 1960s and 70s, to our most recent work inspired by and in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. Tonight, though, I'd like to share a bit about our church's and our town's history that supported institutional racism instead of dismantling it, and then lead us in a time of reflection and prayer. As many of you may know, in 2018, I uncovered Needham's buried enslavement history. With the help of Dr. Gloria Grice of the Needham History Center and Gloria Korsman at Andover Harvard Theological Library, we found that many founding Needham families were enslavers. Most of these enslavers were members of First Parish, as we were the only congregation in the town in the 1700s. Even our founding pastor was an enslaver. And how did such facts disappear from the public record? Well, for the 200th anniversary of our town in 1911, the town historian and my congregation's clerk prepared the official town history, a massive tome. Dr. Grice and I have determined that this historian knew the enslavement history in Needham and chose to leave it out of his record. I imagine he was embarrassed by this part of his church's history, so instead of airing out that wound to help it heal, he covered it up and allowed the town's bedrock of white supremacy and colonization to quietly remain and fester. A wound cannot heal if it has received no treatment. An untreated wound continues to infect the body, as untreated racism has continued to infect our town and our nation. This is why the work of reparations, the work of repair and restoration is necessary in our country. Tonight we gather in vigil to treat a community wound with truth and resolve. And we are honored to have Marvin Henry grace us with his presence, his story, and his courage. Marvin, it is a blessing to have you as part of the Needham community, and we are deeply aggrieved and sorry that you have been so badly mistreated by town officers and have not received justice. Those gathered here tonight and other Needham allies wish to repair our relationship with you through, at the very least, solidarity and accountability. Would all of you participating please join me in the spirit of reflection, meditation, and prayer? I share with you these words adapted from Genderqueer Unitarian Universalist Minister of Color, Reverend Teresa Soto, written to mourn the murder of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. You are welcome to say the refrain along with me, even though you're on mute from your own homes. The refrain is, "We know Black Lives Matter, we bear witness." We know Black Lives Matter, we bear witness. The media gives us conflicting stories. We know Black Lives Matter, we bear witness. We are not distracted by misinformation. We know Black Lives Matter, we bear witness. Misinformation encourages us to put our frustration and sadness somewhere outside of ourselves, on the police, on a young man, on the system. We know Black Lives Matter, we bear witness. As a community, we reflect on the thread that connects the actions of an armed police officer with our own. We examine our snap judgments, we challenge the times we have remained silent when another suffered. We consider how our community spends its budget. We know Black Lives Matter. We bear witness. We recognize that in order to challenge a system that is built to maintain racism, we must also contemplate the everyday actions that we perform and their effects. We know Black Lives Matter. We bear witness. We do not look away from the things that are hard to see. We see the system that dehumanizes and brutalizes people of marginalized identities. We see how we defy and dismantle that system, or how we reinforce and acquiesce to it. We know Black Lives Matter. We bear witness. When justice eludes us, we take courage. We extend love. We bear witness because we know Black Lives Matter. May this gathering become a blessing on our town and our neighboring communities. Thank you all for being here tonight, and amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend Katie. Oh, that was powerful. I almost got a little teary on that one. Thank you, Reverend Katie. So we're here tonight to have a bit of a conversation with my buddy, my friend, Marv Henry, and with attorney Lauren Sampson. And it's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. And it's certainly a joy to have Marv join us tonight. So for those of you who may not have been with us during last fall's Needham Diversity Initiative Summit, where I did a bit of an interview with Marv, and he had an opportunity to share a little bit about himself. For the benefit of those who were not able to join us that evening, we want to dive into a little bit of that with him, but we especially would like to hear directly from Marv about the incident that took place last January, where he is what he feels about that today, what he feels about Needham today, and his hopes for our future, as well as our hopes for ourselves. So I think Marv is with us, and so is Lauren. And I think, if we can potentially spotlight the three of us, that would be amazing. And hopefully our technology will hold up in trying to do that. But just before I ask Marv an important question, I thought I would share a little bit of the context for kind of how the Needham community got to know more about this, the incident that impacted Marv last year, and continues to, of course, in many ways. My friend, my dear friend, Michelle Chalmers, who I believe is also on with us, reached out to me one evening, I believe it was in February of last year. And she was formerly a longtime resident of Wellesley, and the former lead of World of Wellesley, the organization that is a counterpart to the Needham Diversity Initiative. And Michelle called me very late on a Friday night, which was not very typical of her to call, after 11. And she was very concerned about a story that she had heard from someone that day. She had gone to Marv, who is a massage therapist who practices in Needham. And she ended up in a conversation with him when she could tell that he seemed to be upset. And he opened up to her and shared about the incident that had taken place just a couple weeks before that. And Michelle was so deeply affected by what happened, what she'd heard, that she wanted to reach out to someone in Needham to just have a conversation about, what do we do? Where do we go from here? Are there ways that we can provide him some support? And so, and it was important enough to both of us that she actually came over to my house late that night. And we were up until, probably, 2 o'clock in the morning, perhaps, Michelle, maybe if she remembers, talking this through and trying to figure out if there might be a way for us to provide him some support. That led to outreach to a number of folks around town, town leadership and others who are very active in progressive Needham and in other aspects of town. And from that, Lauren became engaged with this matter and the ensuing investigation. So just to give everybody a little bit of context there. And so again, I want to personally thank Michelle for doing that outreach to me that evening. And I'm just feeling very grateful that we've been able to provide some support for Marv, who himself was already fighting. He was already doing the best he could to advocate for himself. And so we are just grateful that we were able to get behind him to provide him support. So Marv, are you there? I would love to get our conversation going. So Marvin, can you just, before we go into, exactly what happened that night, can you just share just a little bit about yourself? Where you're from, a little bit about your work in Needham, that kind of thing. Would you mind?
Sure. I am originally from Jamaica, but I been residing in Boston since 1996. I started my practice in massage therapy in 2000 after my first kid was born, and I have been helping people ever since then. And I started in Needham a few years ago, and I love doing what I do. I help people to relax. I help people to feel better about themselves, and I help people to repair after injuries.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as I asked you, back in November during the Needham Diversity Summit, we often don't hear about the person behind a headline. Whenever we hear a story, whether it's the radio, it's TV, it's online on YouTube, whatever it may be, we don't oftentimes hear, any of the details about the human being behind the story. And so I thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself. And I know too that you and I have talked about our children, your four boys to my three kids, and some of the trials and tribulations of parenthood. So I certainly appreciate you sharing some of those stories with me over time as well. So Marv, do you mind, and I know that you've been through this several times in the last year, but for the benefit of the folks who are on today who may not be as familiar with the story, do you mind sharing a bit about what happened that day in January of last year? Both, maybe before and then during and then after your visit to the CVS?
Sure. I was running a few minutes behind to get to work, so I called up Town Pizza, which is not too far from the CVS, and ordered a salad to go to work. And I parked in front of Town Pizza because they weren't ready as yet, and I ran over to CVS to get, and this is something I've been doing for ever since I've been working in Needham. I run over there to grab a case of cough drops and my Arizona, and I purchased my items. Said thank you to the cash register, whose name was Jess, and got it out of there to go grab my salad and head over to work. I got my stuff at the Town Pizza as I put my stuff in my van and I'm walking around to the driver's side to enter my vehicle. I heard someone say, "Hey, you come here," and the officer grabbed my arm and throw me up against my vehicle. And I kept asking them, what's going on? What's going on? What's this about? What's this about? And they basically just kept ignoring me. They rotated me around to the other side of my vehicle, which was in front of Starbucks. And for a good 35 minutes, they had me in handcuffs, just being paraded in front of the store, just not telling me what's going on. Eventually, one of the sergeant came over and told me that someone pointed me out as stealing something from CVS, in which I asked them what could I have stolen that would warrant them to do this to me, and they couldn't give me an answer. And basically, they told me that after the whole incident was over, that they'll send me a summons to go to court, and basically let me go so I could go to work, which I couldn't really work because I was traumatized from the whole incident. My hands was already hurting from the handcuffs that they put on me, and I asked them to release it just so I, wouldn't be in so much pain, which they didn't do. And, just the fact of asking them to just either make a phone call to my job or just walk across the street to my job to let them know that I'm going to be late, they couldn't do that, So the fact that they pretty much treated me like a criminal while I was innocent was was just very disturbing. And, I didn't really understand why they had to do that.
Thank you. And I remember you recalled to me kind of the looks that you were getting from people as they were walking by. And could you share a little bit about there was a gentleman with a little boy with him. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what you witnessed from him, and maybe just what your own reaction to that was and how it made you feel?
Yeah, it made me extremely embarrassed. An older gentleman was in Starbucks with his child, and he had to shield his grandchild's face from the situation because he didn't want his grandchild to see that. That really made me, feel like, what I mean, like, um, it's kind of hard to put in words. It just had me feeling some kind of way.
Understood. Thank you. Were you in the aftermath of the incident? Were you ever concerned about continuing to work in Needham? And did you feel that you needed to, avoid that particular CVS store after that? What were your thoughts around all of that,
To,
continuing to
to
come into
this
town? Mhm.
to this day, I still don't go back to that CVS. Um, I love what I do, so I didn't want to leave my customers or the people I work with. I the so far the town ever since the incident, all my clients have all reached out to me with love. People that have heard about the situation and spread nothing but love towards me, and I really appreciate all of it. You know what I mean? Um, I I have no ill will towards the people of Needham because stuff happens. I would just like to see a change in the way the police department conduct the way they do business.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, Yeah, I mean, when it comes to that, is there anything in particular in the way that you were treated that you would like to see changed? Based on your own experience.
Yeah, like they weren't trying to listen to me at all. They kind of ignored me while I was telling them I had a receipt. If they had took a minute to look at my receipt the moment they had arrested me, then the situation would have been less of a drag to me versus they looked at the receipt at like almost 35 minutes throughout the situation. It was just embarrassing to me to say, why would I steal something when I have money to purchase my item? The fact that they would label me as a person who steals something just because of the color of my skin was embarrassing.
Thank you. And then, lastly, before I, bring Lauren into the conversation, um, in what ways, did you work to try to advocate for yourself? What were the things that you, attempted to do or did do to try to get clarity and information, from the police department and just around the situation in general?
I went down to the police department after the incident and tried to get a copy of the tape that they said they have me on tape that I was stealing something. And, it kind of fell on deaf ears. They had me fill out this form that I gave to them, and they sent me back an email saying that it was under investigation and they couldn't give me anything. So, until you guys kind of stepped in and Miss Lauren got involved and was able to take the situation over, that's how I got any type of indication of what was going on, even to the fact to find out that they so-called claims me and my wife were stealing stuff there for a couple of months now. So, it's just hilarious to me to see how they try to turn me into a villain just to cover up the situation.
Mm. Thank you. Thanks, Marvin. And again, I know I'm sure it's not easy to keep recounting this. And so we really appreciate you for doing it. Whenever we're trying to make change, unfortunately, sometimes it means that those of us who've been deeply affected by something, we're telling a story over and over again in the hopes that by doing so, that we're able to make change in the end. Um, Lauren, I know, Lauren is an attorney for Lawyers for Civil Rights, an organization that advances equality and justice. And Lauren, can you tell us just a little bit about your work with Lawyers for Civil Rights? And I remember when the organization was called the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. It was like a long name that the organization had a long time ago, but I know that you all have been around for some time. Do you mind sharing a little bit about just, the work that you do in general, and then how you came to be involved in this matter with Marvin, and why?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you to Equal Justice Needham for organizing this. So I'm an attorney with Lawyers for Civil Rights. We are a racial justice and immigrants' rights impact litigation organization. We've been defending and protecting the rights of people of color and immigrants since the 1960s, initially founded when then President John F. Kennedy put a call out to the bar to respond and defend civil rights, and a number of attorneys in Boston responded. So we've been working on issues of racial justice for a long time, and police accountability is certainly a significant part of our docket, even before the murder of George Floyd and the protests this summer. Another client of ours is the family of a young man named Terence Coleman, a Black man with mental illness who was shot and killed by Boston police some years ago. We represent his mother, Hope Coleman, in her ongoing quest for justice against the Boston Police Department. So we know and have known for years that there is a significant problem in the ways in which police departments across the country, and of course in Massachusetts, engage with members of our community, especially those members of color, those immigrants, and particularly, of course, men of color. And when I heard about Mr. Henry's case through a connection that we have through Progressive West Roxbury, who's connected with Progressive Needham, we were horrified by his story and wanted to take it on as a way of making clear to members of the community that this happens here. This isn't just something you see in a video in Minneapolis, in Texas, in California. This happens right here in our own backyard, and we have an opportunity here to push for change. And so I represent Mr. Henry along with another colleague of mine at Lawyers for Civil Rights, as well as our wonderful pro bono counsel at WilmerHale.
Thank you so much. And can you share a little bit about, at least at this juncture, how the investigation evolved from the beginnings of your kind of getting involved with it, and then up through, just recent times. And then we'll share a little bit more about where we are right now in a few minutes.
Sure. So we sent a demand letter on Mr. Henry's behalf of, shortly after we became acquainted with him, heard about his story, and had the opportunity to put the team together. And the demand letter really laid out the story that you've heard tonight and made that request for change, for systematic change by the Needham Police Department to change those policies that could have resulted in this treatment of Mr. Henry. And the demand letter resulted in a couple things. First, as folks might remember, the police department released an somewhat unredacted report to the public, created a website, and posted a number of things, including ostensibly photographs as well as recordings. And that, as folks might remember, was a very incomplete perspective on this story. The police report only unredacted Mr. Henry's name. It left every other name redacted, and it also adopted the tone of the officer who had viewed videotapes and who had drawn these conclusions, most of which were erroneous. For example, the report was written as if Mr. Henry was pictured in previous video footage from the previous year showing alleged shoplifting at CVS. Folks, I've seen those videos. There is no way that anyone could mistake Mr. Henry for the person featured in those videos. The only similarity the two share is that they are Black men. That is the only similarity they share. But the police report presented as fact that Mr. Henry is the person featured in those videos. In addition, folks might remember that the website described photographs that were ostensibly of the day in January 2020. Not true. Those were screenshots of the videos from the previous year with no explanation, no indication as to why they were actually included as opposed to the more contemporary ones. And so this became in addition to our general quest for justice for Mr. Henry, also trying to get the police department to be transparent and honest about what exactly was going on. It took multiple contact attempts and multiple additions and amendments to the police report to get the statement from the town, Mr. Henry is not a suspect. He's not pictured in any of the videos. He is not the person we are looking for at this juncture. And that was only with continued dogged pushing from us and from a giant law firm like Wilmer Hale, which of course makes you wonder how many Marvin Henrys are there out there who don't happen to have this legal team who can push the police department to do what they should have done initially and make clear who the actual individual is who is the suspect in that case. So following on the demand letter and the continued conversations over setting the record straight and being clear and transparent about what has actually gone on, 2 different investigations were launched. The first is an independent investigation separate from the police department, headed by attorney Natasha Tidwell, who has a lot of experience in work surrounding systemic racism and police misconduct and is herself a former police officer. That investigation is still ongoing. The other investigation is an internal affairs investigation, so led by the Needham Police Department itself. That investigation recently concluded, and folks may have seen the letter that Mr. Henry received that has also, I know, been shared with a number of reporters, indicating that only 1 charge was sustained and the rest, including the charge of bias, were not sustained or the officers were exonerated. We are, as you can imagine, incredibly disappointed by these results. I think they point to something we've known for a long time, that police departments are not always able and are often unable to police themselves. And so while we are hopeful that the independent investigation will yield a more fruitful and systemic resolution, we continue to ensure that all options remain on the table.
Thank you, Lauren, for that. For anyone who may have missed any of the news articles, the TV reports and so forth, thank you so much for wrapping that up in a nice bow and just kind of giving us a great summary of exactly what's been going on. So thank you so much for that. And now I'm going to turn the proverbial floor over to Smriti, who has some additional information for us with regard to some of the research, that she and others have been doing.
Actually, I'll start. Rebecca will start us off, and then I will continue.
Thank you. Thanks, Rebecca.
Sure, I can do that. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. Smriti and I and others, as part of Equal Justice Needham, we wanted to conduct a fact-based understanding of what does policing look like in Needham, and be able to answer sort of basic questions that we had, such as, is there evidence of racial disparities? What are the goals of public safety for the Needham Police Department? And are we meeting those goals? Things that seem like, as Needham citizens, we should know what these things are. These should be accessible metrics. It turns out it's actually fairly difficult to learn about these things in Needham. And there are no publicly accessible dashboards, for example. And so what we did was we did what we are legally entitled to do, which is to do a public records request. And so we submitted 37 questions to the Needham Police Department. It actually cost about $1,000 to do that. And we basically received quite a bit of data from the Needham Police Department. We got a lot of policy documents. We got statistics on things like arrests and so forth. And we are currently in the process of finishing a report on these findings. And that report will be made available to the town in the near future. We're finishing it. We're then going to give the department a chance to respond to it, and then we will be making it publicly available, but you're all getting a little bit of a sneak peek on it tonight. One of the things that I think was the most interesting in doing this work really was just how difficult it was, not just for us to get the data, but even for the department itself to get the data. It took many hours of effort for the department to be able to answer these questions. And so I think that was one of our biggest takeaways, was clearly if it's taking 17 hours to tell us how many times we're handcuffing someone, or, or 6.5 hours to tell us what's the race of students who have incidents interacting with a school resource officer, if it's that hard to know that, then clearly how much can the department be monitoring these sorts of things either? So that was kind of our biggest takeaway. We also did look at the incidents of racial disparities, and I'm going to turn it to Smriti to talk about this table of what we saw as disparities.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. So this is just a little summary table of some of the data that we collected. And so we thought we would share this with you. And I think, the point, again, to repeat something Lauren said earlier, that, Mr. Henry's story may not be the only one of its kind. So I just want to point out maybe 3 things about this table and then make a comment to reinforce something Rebecca said. So these are different kinds of police-civilian interactions, with differing degrees of severity in terms of their possible consequences. And, the background to all of this is, as far as the population of Needham is only 6% Black and Hispanic. So I think we should keep that in mind as we look at these statistics. And what we note is, I want to highlight in particular the row that says persons handcuffed. And first, I want to note that over 400 people were handcuffed by the Needham police over the last 3 years. So I have to say I was maybe naively surprised by that. So that is a very large number. And of those, as you'll see, in 2019-20, our data is September through August. Of that, 35% were people of color, so Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And within that, over 95% were Black and Hispanic. So Asian and Indigenous people count for a very small share of these figures. This is primarily Black and Hispanic people. I want to also point you to the row for offenses for which criminal charges were sought. And here you can see that percentage goes up to 45% in 2019-20, who were BIPOC, and of that, once again, over 95% are Black and Hispanic. And then the second thing I want to point out is, for most of these categories, the percentages have increased over the 3-year period we have data for. So the racial disparity has intensified, and that is, very notable. And then the third thing I want to point out is that in the case of both offenses, arrests, what you'll notice is, and when people are charged with multiple offenses, or they're arrested on multiple charges, and we kind of isolate those folks who had more than one charge levied against them, the percentage of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, once again, primarily Black and Hispanic people, goes up even further. So if we examine the subset of folks with multiple charges, in the case of offenses for which criminal charges were sought, as you'll see, that percentage goes up to 54% in 2019-20. So these strike us as fairly high shares given the makeup of the population of Needham. And obviously, our data does not allow us to answer the question of why these shares are as high as they are. But to repeat something that Rebecca said, what is concerning to us is, as far as we know, this is the first time Needham's public has ever seen these statistics presented in this form. Please correct us if we're wrong, but I don't think we have seen these numbers presented to us. And so we, have a set of questions for the police department and a set of questions for the oversight bodies, the select board in particular that is supposed to be overseeing the activities of the police department, which is, how come these are not metrics that are being systematically tracked by NPD and asked for by the select board? And so I will just leave it at that, and I will turn it over to Rebecca.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly right, Smriti, in terms of, what we see as where would we go from here. I think it does need to start this conversation around transparency and metrics and accountability and oversight. And, the oversight bodies currently are the select board and the town manager. But again, clearly these numbers are difficult to get. And some of that is based on things that are, how our IT systems are set up, and, are we tracking things like this? For example, handcuffing took a particularly long amount of time to get because our systems don't track that whatsoever because it's not considered a use of force. So there's some really interesting questions to have in terms of, what do we track? Who's tracking them? Who gets to see them? And we hope that this report will start that conversation with the leadership of the town and the populace of the town. We also noticed a number of policies and procedures that we see opportunity for modernizing. A related, very important topic is on mental health, which is a topic that the police department themselves talks quite a bit about the importance of. We definitely have a lot of questions and thoughts on how that topic has shown up in our policies and procedures. And we'll kind of leave you with that, but we would be very eager to have all of you on this call engage with us as the report is published and be part of that town conversation.
Thank you so much to Rebecca and Smriti. Some really compelling information and thank you very much for compiling that and sharing it in such a wonderful, informative way. So I've seen that the chat has been very active while you all were talking. So hopefully you can check out some of the questions there. And again, since tonight's occasion is recorded, we will also obviously have the ability to look back at all of the questions that were in comments in the chat as well. So thank you very much for that information. I mean, it's the kind of information I think all communities should probably have access to. So, where do we go from here? We are where we are. Now, so where next? Where do we go next? And I think one of the things I, personally wanted to hear, and Marv, I hope you don't mind me asking you, just from your own personal perspective. I mean, I think we all have our own opinions about what should happen next, and what kind of community we want to be. But I think we'd love to hear from you. What do you think would be the next step for a community like Needham when it comes to policing? Thoughts there?
Definitely allowing the police department to be held to the fire about what they're doing. Just like how right now the country is trying to hold ex-President Trump for his behavior. I believe the same thing should go to all people in a leadership position. If you're going to take a position to be a leader and be the one to oversee other people, you should have the responsibility to treat everyone fairly. I think it's in the forefathers setup where they say all people should be treated equally. I don't exactly remember the part of the Constitution where they say it, but it says like all men should be treated equally, and women as well, along those lines. So if you are gonna treat someone differently from the way you treat your son or the way you treat your brother, that should not go down, or that should be second thought before you do that. I'm a father. I want my sons to grow up in a time or a lifetime in which they don't have to go through what I had to go through. It would have took one extra step for myself to lose my life that day. If I wasn't listening to a book at the moment that was very calming to me while this whole situation was going down, I probably wouldn't be here today. You know, it, it's just that scary to even think about. After the whole situation, I was trembling for at least 20 to 30 minutes just thinking about how easily I could have lost my life. If I was just as hot-headed as I used to be in high school and try to put up a fight the moment the officer put his hands on me, knowing that I did nothing wrong, I would be dead. So I would just love for future incidents in similar manner to go down with some kind of compassion and empathy for someone that doesn't look like you.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you, Marvin. Thanks again. Like I said, I know it's not easy to recount all of this over and over again. And, but, we're in the middle of Black History Month, right? And I'm telling you, my friend, you are making Black history with the way that you are standing up for yourself and me and my family and others. So I really appreciate you and respect the fact that the way that you have stood up for yourself. So thank you very much.
Well, none of this would be possible without you, Miss Anderson.
You're very sweet. But like I said, I thank you for that. And again, I think you and I both also owe, Michelle Chalmers, some thanks as well for
Yes, I
her
definitely do.
outreach, but thank you for telling her the story from the very beginning. So otherwise, where would we be right now? We don't know. So, but thank you so much, Marvin. As you know, you and I will continue to be in touch as we have been. And I want to thank Lauren again for joining us and giving such a wonderful explanation of the investigation and everything that's been going on. I want to just share some, not parting words, because that'll be Noah in just a minute, but just maybe some encapsulating thoughts. So what's next for us as a community members who love our town and want the best for everyone who lives here? It's important for all of us to be as courageous, resilient, and dedicated to matters of justice for all, as Marvin Henry has been in advocating for justice for himself. Issues around justice don't only influence the lives of those directly affected in the moments when it's absent. A fully just society, which protects those most historically disadvantaged or discriminated against, naturally also exhibits expanded protections for the larger society. Just as communities like ours are searching for answers that help advance quality and equitable education in our schools and quality and equitable healthcare and living environments, we should ask ourselves and hold law enforcement accountable as well to ensure justice for all in our beloved Needham. We can multitask as citizens and both appreciate the hard, challenging work of these public servants, and at the same time, hold them to the highest, most equitable standards of service. Our systems must be made for and serve us all. In the nearly 7 years that my family has lived in Needham, I've grown very fond of this town. As you did at some point, my husband and I too made an informed choice to live here for many of the same reasons that make Needham both livable and lovable. So we should all hold our expectations just as high for justice that just is. For each resident, no matter race, religion, age, sexual orientation, gender, or socioeconomic status. And I'm really excited to now be among the most diverse slate of candidates for public office in Needham ever, we believe, right? As a mother and professional seeking to become a town meeting member from Precinct E, I, along with others like Marcus Nelson, Rebecca Young, Anna Geraldo Kerr, Mo Handel, Rebecca Weber, Lakshmi Balachandra, and Liz Lee, are a testament to the multiplicity of thought, lived experiences, issues of interest, and talent that our town has cultivated. We are all proof of the various ways we can care for, advocate for, and feel a sense of belonging in this community. We are already a great town. Let's be an even better one. Let's be the change we want to see, not by way of slogans alone, but by the way we show up as neighbors, the way we vote, and in our everyday deeds. And now, Noah, the mic is yours. Thanks so much for hosting tonight's event, and thanks to everyone for being here.
Thank you, Gretchen, and thank you, Marvin, and to everybody who came out to speak tonight. Thank you all for coming. I just am feeling like my heart beating really fast. This feels like community power right here. I just, hearing Gretchen's backstory in detail, I don't think I'd heard that whole story about Marvin. I mean, it starts with Marvin's bravery in sharing that horrible experience with Michelle, and then Michelle sharing with Gretchen. And like, this is really a beautiful example of how a community mobilizes for justice. And just to reiterate some things that people have said tonight, this happens here, like Lauren said. This really, it's time to take this look at Needham, and it's time for that change. And we're mobilizing for justice here, not in a punitive way, but in a restorative and in a transformative way. Like Gretchen's mentioning, all these amazing people running for office in Needham, like that's some long transformative justice. We're gonna see the effects of this moment for decades, for generations to come in the future of this town. And we're all here to support Marvin Henry, and we want Marvin to heal. And what Marvin has voiced for, what he wants is he wants to see change, and we are those change agents. We are those people who can realize that change that Marvin wants to see, and that couldn't happen without him stepping forward. Unfortunately, it has to happen. This is the genesis of all of this, is a really horrific incident. It happened, and we need to really take stock of the reality of this, that this is our town, and just look at that fact and change. And let's be that change. There are so many concrete ways that we can do it. It can be running for office, as so many people are doing. It's voting on April 13th in our local elections. When you see an incident like this happening, anytime the police are harassing or like accosting somebody, pull out your phone and film them. Even the act of just holding your phone up can make the difference in potentially saving somebody's life. Certainly saving their day from being really made a lot worse. So if you have any suspicions, just pull out the phone and start recording. We've seen time and time again that is a major deterrent to police, which speaks volumes. And as a couple of folks have mentioned, handcuffs are still a use of force, or sorry, handcuffs are not considered a use of force in Needham. And we need those to be considered a use of force. As Marvin explained, his wrists were hurting, and he's a massage therapist. Like that's his life right there. And it's just, our use of force policy still does not recognize handcuffing as a use of force. And that's something that our town can and should change. Please be looking out for that report that Smriti and Rebecca gave us some of those initial findings on. That should be coming out in the next few weeks through Equal Justice in Needham. So if you would like more information on everything that Equal Justice in Needham is doing, that includes all of this public safety, accountability, and oversight work, as well as housing and zoning policy. We have an amazing group called Equal Justice in Needham for Families that's putting together story times for families, as well as like adult discussion groups. You can find all of that information on the website, www.equaljusticeneedham.org. I think someone is going to put the link in the chat. I also want to shout out, there's an event that will be co-hosted by Reverend Katie Scudera that will be happening. Yes, thank you for putting that link in the chat, John. So if you're interested in hearing more about what Katie mentioned before, the history of enslavement in Needham, John just put a link in the chat. The event, I believe, is February 21st. And so you can find more information there. There will be information on Equal Justice in Needham's website as well. Let's see. Did I miss anything? Okay. I think that's everything. I just want to give one final thank you to Marvin for joining us tonight. Much, much appreciated. And what we can do, we are here to support you. What we can do is be the change. So let's be the change. Let's make Needham more equal and more just. And let's do it together. Thank you again to everybody for making this happen and for joining us tonight, especially Marvin. Yeah. Alrighty. Have a good one, and in solidarity, see you soon.
Good night, everyone.